Well, hello there. I'm going to go over what I did in class on Tuesday. That's where I introduced 3DSMax to you students. So, um, on your desktop, you're going to find a blue icon, 3ds Max 2023. Well, yours is going to be 2020. You could also find it by clicking on search and typing 3ds Max. And mine's offering it in French. I don't want it in French. I like it in English. So I'll just double click my icon. Make sure you open up Max. The first time that you open it up, it's going to ask you if you want to have classic or design layout. Please select the classic layout. That way, what I'm doing will look like what you're going to be doing. It's a complicated tool, and you want things to be consistent. When Max opens up for the first time, um, a different window is going to pop up. It's called the welcome screen. Once Max opens up, you're going to see this welcome screen. The reason why mine didn't pop up is because I unchecked that box right there. It does tell you some interesting things, like that's the Scene Explorer, command panel. You can select your kind of workspace you want to be in, uh, how to pan and tilt. Right here, tumble the view, pan, zoom. But I don't need this window, so I'm going to close it. All right, now this is 3ds Max. Across the top here, you have the main menu. The main menu's got a lot of buttons in it. There's even some stuff we can't see over here because the resolution on my screen is. But if I get that, see when I get the mouse over the right spot right there, like there's two arrows and here's the regular mouse button. But if I get it positioned in one of these places where I can get that hand, I can click my mouse and then slide that over. And this will be useful because it'll expose me to the render menu, which I might end up talking about a little later. Just want you to know that there's stuff over there. Over here is our scene panel. It's going to tell us everything that's in our scene as we start building things. We're going to get objects in our scene. It's going to tell us what objects are there. These are the viewports. This is a perspective viewport, that's the default viewport over here. And I'm right-clicking to change viewports. I got the front viewport, and I'm going to right-click my mouse to change viewports. It's the top viewport. Right-clicking this viewport, it's the left viewport. Let's see. You can maximize any of these viewports. Any of these viewports can be maximized by pressing and holding down your Alt key and pressing W. That will maximize the viewport that you've selected. And there we go. Thank you, Lenovo. Let's build something here so we can have something to look at while we do this. How about a cylinder? To do this, you come over here to this is the Create panel. And on the Create panel, you click on the cylinder button, and then you would click and drag your mouse. And as I'm clicking and dragging, look over on the right-hand side. There's a box called Parameters. And can you see as I move my mouse, the radius is changing? So, I'll get to a radius that I like. What the heck, 18.13. Unclick my mouse. And now I can either raise up this cylinder or I can push it down underneath that grid. I'm going to raise it up so it'll have a positive height, and then I'm going to click. That sets the height. Now the tool is still active. See how the button's still blue right there, and I got a crosshair, and if I click and I start dragging, I'm going to end up making another circle, another cylinder. Don't want to do that. So to end the tool, there are two ways to end the tool. First way is to just right-click your mouse. Right-clicking your mouse ends the tool. Another way to end the tool, I just turned the tool back on. Another way to end the tool is to switch to this tab right here. Right next to the Create tab is the Modify tab. When you switch to the Modify tab, that also will turn the tool off because you're not on the Create tab anymore. In the Modify tab, you're going to be looking at the properties of the last thing you messed with. And well, there's that radius. And if I adjust any of these properties here in the Modify tab, that radius will change, the height will change. And let's see. Important keys to know. F3 will turn on and off the default shading, or as I like to call it, the skins. It turns on the skins, turn the skin off. With the skins on, if you press F4, F4 will give you what the wireframe is. And that's where we can see things like our height segments. You know, if I take that down, height segments right over here, height segments. If I take that down to 1, you can see that there's only one height segment. But I bump it up, now there's 2 height segments, 3, and now there's 5. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How come I'm counting 6? Right. Height segments. Up here, these cap segments. At the moment, there's only one. But if I click, one click up, 2 cap segments, it adds a lot of details. It adds vertices, edges, and polygons to the model. So I'm going to take that cap segments back down. So now, moving things around. If I, with my mouse out over here, if I push the middle mouse button down, I'm going to get the hand and I can move my scene around. So I'm getting the hand, I can move my scene around. If I press the Alt key and push down the middle mouse button, this lets me tilt and orbit my view. So I can tilt and orbit it. And when you're doing 3D modeling, you're going to do a lot of this. Do a lot of tilting and orbiting. You can also do that tilting and orbiting thing up here with this box, just by clicking on that box, that gizmo in the corner. But I just find that I work better with the Alt key and the middle mouse button. Notice this gizmo is also labeled, you know, front, and then left and back and right. These all correspond, if I press Alt W, back to the 4 views, to the front, top, and left views. That's what this whole gizmo is showing you. All right. So I made a cylinder here. Let's go ahead and throw the cylinder away. Delete the cylinder. I'm going to go back to the Create tab. What's some other thing I can make? Let's make a box. I'm going to click here and drag, and here's a box. I'm going to right-click to end the tool and switch to the Modify tab real quick. And at the moment, this box only has one length, one width, and one height segments. But if I bump these up to 2, all of them up to 2, you can see that I just added a whole bunch of, there's a lot of new vertices and edges that we changed 1 polygon into 4 polygons. Since this has 6 sides, that means we just multiplied the number of polygons by 6. 6 times 4. So there's some things we can do here. There's these 3 tools here across the top. I want to talk about these tools. There's the Move tool, the Select and Rotate tool, and the Select and Uniform Scale tool. If you'll check out the assignment online, you'll notice that there's a link to some hotkeys. And I need you to become familiar with all these hotkeys. Z for zooming to a selected object, W to get the Move tool, E to get the Rotate tool, R to get the Scale tool. Middle mouse button, we've already seen that one, pans the selected view. Alt middle mouse button, tilt and orbit the selected view. Scroll middle mouse button. We didn't talk about that yet. Scrolling the middle mouse button zooms. And this is an interesting one. If I put my mouse over here and I zoom like this, now when I scroll my middle mouse button, I am zooming on where my mouse is. But if I put my mouse over the box and I scroll my middle mouse button, now I'm zooming on where. So basically, this scrolling zoom is going to zoom wherever you got your mouse. So if your mouse is over here, that's where you're going to zoom. You can quickly lose things. You might, especially with this middle mouse button, you can lose things really fast. As long as the box is still selected, or even if the box is not selected, oh my goodness, you can press the Z key. The Z key, like I said in those hotkeys right there, the Z key zooms on a selected object. In this case of this scene right here, if I had nothing selected, but I middle mouse wheeled my way to the point where everything disappeared, if I press the Z key, it'll still zoom back on the grid. Since it's the only place I have objects in here, so it's only going to zoom even on the unselected object. It's going to zoom on it. So let's see. There's this Move tool I want to talk about. Now, the hotkey for the Move tool is W. Now, the Move tool is turned on, but let's see. I don't see anything yet, and that's because I didn't select the box. But now that I've selected the box, you can now see the XYZ gizmo. we're in three-dimensional space here. That gizmo is showing it off to you. Remember in your math class, you got that Cartesian coordinate plane with the x-axis and the y-axis. And now that we're in 3D space, we've got the z-axis. And we are able to move in those three axes. Mousing over any of these squares that you see here, mousing over that square, now I'm moving in z and x. Moving in z and x. If I grab this square, I'm moving in z and y. And if I grab this square down here, I am moving in x and y. And so understanding how the move tool works, it's important because you're going to be needing to move things around. Now, sorry for all the sound effects. The scale tool, the hotkey for that is E. No, R. The scale tool, the hotkey for the scale tool is R. I can scale this whole thing, and I can scale it back up. I could scale it just in the ZY axis. See how it's scaling it just in the ZY axis? Or I could scale it in the XZ axis. I can even scale just in one axis, just scale in the Z axis, or just scale in the Y axis, or just scale in the X axis. So there's choices. Now, interesting thing to note here. When I scaled in X, it goes out in both directions. When I scale in Z, it pulls it up, but it stays anchored to the ground there. Where because I guess X, Y, and Z are going to stay put. They're not going to move, and so it's going to be scaling from the location of the object. All right. And there's also the rotate tool. The hotkey for the rotate tool is E. This gizmo also works in a similar fashion. You can rotate in just the y-axis, or you could rotate just in the x-axis, or you can rotate just in the z-axis. You can also rotate, and this is just, they don't have like rotating in two axes here, but they have rotating in all three. That's the other choice. The other choice is just rotating in all three. That's the rotate tool. All right. Let's continue to make some objects. There's two things here. There's a sphere and there's a geosphere. If you, I'm going to right click to end the tool, and I'm going to circle select so I get both objects and press Z. I want to look at these two objects. I want to compare and contrast them. If you happen to not, I'm going to go back to the select object also. The select object tool, there's no hotkey for it. They need to make a hotkey for that, or you could just set one up if you wanted it yourself. But select object is very important. When you don't want to be moving, scaling, or rotating, make sure you're on select object. That way you don't accidentally move, scale, or rotate something, because you can click and drag and all of a sudden stuff's getting changed. Take a look at the structure here. If you can't see it in your computer, remember what I told you. F4, the F4 key, that turns on the edged faces. It's also called the wireframe. F3 turns on the skins. So we could just turn off the skins and you can see that wireframe. But here, a sphere on this side, this is a sphere, and over here we got a geosphere. Hopefully you can see the difference in their structure. The sphere is made out of polygons, in particular quadrilaterals, four-sided polygons. The geosphere is made out of triangles. So it's composed of triangles. Put enough triangles in there and you end up with something that looks like a smooth ball. Anyway, I don't use geospheres much, but just want you to know that it's there. It might come in handy someday. I do use spheres a lot, and spheres are interesting. If I switch over here to the Modify tab, I want you to check something out. There's a setting here called Hemisphere, and if I adjust this to like 0.5, that would be half. a half a hemisphere. Look at that. I just made a half circle just by setting that to 0.5 hemisphere. And let me go over here. Put that back up. Is it 1? No. There we go. 0. Yeah. I guess 1 whole, yeah, would definitely make the sphere disappear. Ooh, but you could animate that. That would be an interesting thing to do. But today we're not talking about animation. Haven't thought about that. Another thing you can do here is also called slice. But in order to use slice, you have to turn it on. To turn it on, you have to check that box. And then the best way to look at this would be from the top view. I'll use the T key and I'll zoom in here on the sphere. And I even turn the skins on just for grins and giggles. And for the slice, if I were to click on this one right here, there we go. If I go into slicing from into a positive number, then we go off to the left here, everything disappears. But over here, I've almost made Pac-Man. Waka, 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 waka. So I almost made Pac-Man right here. So we are able to see that we have a lot of control here. We can create some interesting shapes. I'll press the P key to go back to perspective and take a look at what I made here. And okay, so some fun things, interesting things you can do with spheres. And let me turn the slice off. When I turn it off, even though those numbers are sitting there and that negative 114.5 is still sitting there, it went back to a full sphere. That's because I turned the slice off. There's by default, you can see that by default, the pivot point for the sphere is inside the center. You could change that pivot to the base by clicking on that button or unclicking that button, puts the pivot right back in the center. You may find that you want the pivot point at the bottom of a sphere. Could be a reason you might want that. Anyway, something to think about. All right, spheres. Excellent. Let's see, what else do we got? We've got toruses. Here's a torus. And a torus is basically like an inner tube, a tire. Right-click there. Switch to the Modify tab. Toruses are made out of 2 radiuses. And these radiuses are adjustable. You can actually have a little fun with this if you have enough detail in your model. Like if I ran this up to like 36 sides and maybe 48 segments, that gives me a lot of detail. Let me see what happens when I start hitting twist. And let's see, what am I getting here? Am I getting anything that looks like a twist? Just right there at the very beginning. Let me see what a render looks like, just to see what's going on here. Okay, yeah, it is. It's giving kind of a ripple to it. Let me crank that twist up even more. Ooh. I've never done this before, by the way, but this is kind of interesting. I've just created a rather interesting looking shape just by tweaking the twist setting on there. Let me hit the render button again. That's kind of interesting. Now, this is taking a while. The render is taking a little while because it's having to do some thinking. It's got a lot of edges to light as it's trying to figure out how to light that. Interesting. All right, so that's a torus. I could go ahead and crank that right back down to 0. Any spinner could be returned to 0 by right-clicking it. You can right-click it, and that will turn the spinner into its lowest possible value. Like here on segments, if I right-clicked it, it would drop it to the lowest possible value of 3. I think the original was 24. And then the sides original was like 12. And a basic torus. A little more than 12, actually. Might have been started off at 24. Yeah, it looks a bit rounder. Yeah. So that's a torus. Objects moving, if I move this object over here and up here and maybe even right there, look down here at the bottom with that move tool active. You can see that it's got an X position of 71, Y position of 151. See, there's 71.759 for X. 151.69 for Y, and 41.716 for Z. Very often when you want to work on stuff, you want it located at the origin in 3-dimensional space. And that's located at X is 0, Y is 0, and Z is 0. When X is 0, Y is 0, and Z is 0, an object is centered at 3-dimensional space. And so in the case of this torus right here, That means because its pivot is like it's not even inside the actual torus. It's at the center of the object. And different objects have different pivot points. Later, we're going to look at this tab right over here called the hierarchy tab. Not today. And that's where we learn how to mess with pivot points. But that's not for today's lesson. We don't want to mess with pivot points just yet. You're getting enough as it is right now. There are other standard primitive objects we could make here. Goodbye, torus. I could make a cone, and this is where, you're supposed to be making something for me here. If you check out the fine print on the assignment, for day one, first stage, you're supposed to make students are going to build a 3-scoop ice cream cone centered at the origin. At the end of class, when you get a chance, if you haven't already, be sure to turn in your work here on this assignment. So, making a cone. I've turned on the cone tool over here on the create panel. Turn on the cone tool, and I'm going to draw out the radius of my cone, and then I'm going to move it down. I'm going to give it a negative height. If I give it a positive height, then I'll give it a positive height. Why not? It'll give me a chance to show you the rotate tool. Now, I clicked. After I raised up the height, I clicked, and now I'm adjusting the peak of my cone. I'm going to take it almost down to a point, and then I'm going to click again, and that finishes it. The cone is made. Now, my cone is currently not located at the origin, so I've got the move tool already active on my cone. I'm going to right-click the spinners here on the X, Y, and Z positions down here at the bottom. All of 3 of these should be 0 for the move tool. That's going to center it. But my cone is facing in the wrong direction. So I'm going to turn on the rotate tool. The hotkey for the rotate tool is the E key. And I'm going to rotate. Let me grab this axis here. The number that's changing is Y. I want to rotate this thing so it's pointing in the other direction. Here I've taken it to 24 degrees, but how far do I really need to take it? If I wanted to flip that cone over, I need to move it 180 degrees. And now there it is, down there and the cone's in the right orientation. And if I press on the move tool, it is still located at 0, 0, 0, which is exactly where I need it to be located at the origin. Now, this is going to be our cone. I'm going to switch to the Modify tab, and I'm going to change the name of this from Cone 001 to just Cone. Whenever you're doing 3D modeling, as you build a model, try to get into the habit of naming your objects. Name them early. Maybe even name them when you create them. That way later you don't got to think about, because when you have sphere 1 through 25, sometimes it can be hard to find the right object. This is going to be a simple scene, but still, learn good habits early. My cone here on the Modify tab, my cone's got a radius of 18.339. I'm going to set that to 22. Give it a radius of 22. The other radius, I could actually, if I wanted to, take that right down to 0, and my cone will be a nice little point at the bottom. And then its height, here, my height, I'll just give it a nice round height of 50. And that's looking like a nice cone. I can stick some ice cream in, and boy, it's going to be yummy. Now the color, though, it's this pink color. That is not the kind of color I would picture for a cone. I would picture something from the brown spectrum, especially if you're using one of those cones that looks like a waffle. Now, we're not going to worry about the fact that the top of this thing is flat, because we're just going to bury a sphere inside of here. I'm going to click on the Create tab, and I'm going to click on Sphere. And I'm going to make a sphere right out here, just a click and a drag and an unclick. Right-click to end the tool. And switch to the Modify tab. And I'm going to call this thing Scoop 1. That's the name I'm giving it, Scoop 1. Over here in the Scene panel, I can see I've now got a cone, and I've got a Scoop 1. Also, if you click over here, you're selecting the object. Now, this Scoop 1, I'm going to give it a radius of 20. My cone has a radius of 22. My scoop has a radius of 20. And I want to position the scoop right inside. And the best way to do this then would just be to line it up in X and Y and Z. So I'm going to right click the spinners, and now my scoop is in here. And things look kind of good, but at the same time, I think I can see a little bleeding through on my scoop. So I'm just going to, in the Z axis, I'm going to move this up a little bit so that, the scoop isn't like totally buried in there. So I'm raising it up a little bit in X, and I'm checking to make sure I don't got any bleeding going on. See, when it was down at 0, you can see that part of the scoop is sticking through the side of the. You can see it in the renderer here. The renderer is taking care of it. Yeah, so it's not there. If I hadn't made, or if I had made the cone, let's see. Yeah, if I'd have made the cone, if I'd have left it at 45 instead of 50, then you would see really drastically that the scoop is sticking through the side of the cone. So we just fudge it a little bit here and move it up, and it looks pretty good. Looks like it's resting inside the cone and no more bleeding through the edge. And if you want to, you could put the cone back at 50. All right. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clone scoop 1, and I'm going to have it make 2 more scoops for me. Making a copy in 3ds Max is not just a matter of like control. Control C. You don't control C and control V. That's not how you make copies in Max. Making copies in Max involves you have to like hold down the shift key, and you can clone. You can make copies. They call it cloning. You can clone objects using any of the tools: scale, rotate, or move. All 3 of the tools can be used, and sometimes you may want to use rotate. I have used the rotate tool just to clone an object, but for what I'm doing here, definitely I want to move a clone right above the original. So I'm going to hold down the shift key, and I'm going to click on the Z stick of my sphere. Hold on a second now. I'm on my cone. There we go. Now I'm on my sphere. Hold down my shift, and I'm going to click, and do you see that I've pulled a copy out of here? Now, before I let go of my mouse, I'm going to kind of position this so it looks like one scoop on top of another scoop. And when I'm happy with the position, I'm going to let go of the shift key. I'm let go of my mouse, and this comes up. It's the clone options menu. And in this case, I want to make a copy. If I made it an instance, then whatever I did to one scoop will automatically happen to the other scoop. That's an instance. I just want to be a copy so I can have total control over it. And even though it's going to mess up the name of the next clone, you can set the number of copies to 2, and it's automatically going to make the next scoop and position it in the right spot. And it's going to almost give it the right name. So I'll click OK, and there we go. We got 3 scoops. So let's see. This one, I called it scoop 2. This one, scoop 3. And I want that to just be, instead of scoop 003, I just want that to just be scoop 3. And so there we go. And now I can see the name change over here as well. So apparently you can change names here and over here. Although once I changed the name here, it still said scoop 003 over here until I clicked on one of the other scoops and then clicked back on it. You can rewind the video and check that out. So the last thing I want to do here is I want to like maybe change the color of that to like maybe some, bubblegum color, and maybe change the color of this to some strawberry color, and maybe make the color of that some, because I want to save the best for last, caramel macchiato coffee flavor. And I have made an ice cream cone. I turn off F4, and I'm going to hit the little render button here, and not a bad looking little ice cream cone for my first ice cream cone that I made here in 3D Studio Max. So what I want you to do here now is you need to save your file. I'm going to click File, Save, and the first time you save a file, let me make a new folder here. Demos. All right. There's kind of a naming convention for your files in 3ds Max, because actually you end up with more than one file as you begin to develop a model. So I'm going to call this one ice cream cone And then I put an underbar 001. Um, this numbering convention here, the underbar 001, I got to see it in the name of your file. You need to have underbar 001 in the name of your file. Um, Later, we're going to come back and play around with this file. I might even set up a light studio and some lights on it so we can light it up, maybe apply some materials to it to make the everything look realistic. And uh, in that case, we'll save it differently. But this is our first file. It's the first save. And I'm going to click save. And just like that, my file's now saved onto the computer. And what I need you to do, please, is I need you to go back to the assignment, and off to the side on your view, you have some controls that let you upload files, and you need to please turn in that file. You should be able to find it inside your documents folder, because I asked you to put it in your documents folder, and not that documents folder, this documents folder. And it's inside your 3DSMax folder, inside the scenes folder. So your path's going to be 3DSMax 2020 scenes, and then depending on what class you're in, that's where I've got my stuff. There's the latest one I just made, ice cream cone 001, and you would turn that file into me up on Classroom. So look forward to seeing you in class. Thank you for your attention, and don't forget to like and subscribe.